Hello everyone, this is Alex Schmeeken, one of the resident artists from the Iowa Ceramics Center. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to throw a large platter. I end up throwing something that's about 12 inches in diameter, and I don't actually remember how much clay I started with, but I'm going to guess it was around 5 pounds. I guess you'll see for yourself how much clay I end up using. So I always throw on bats, obviously, for big things. That's really important. Make sure your bat pins are nice and tight so that there's no jiggling around of your bat when you get started. So I just use a regular bat for this guy. If you're throwing something that's wider than the bat pins, you might want to pick out a bat that doesn't have the pins go all the way through, just because that can be a little weird with your plate, but also it's not that big of a deal if the clay smushes through there. Alright, so yeah, actually that looks like around 6 pounds. We'll say that's about that much. And so first, before I add any water or anything, I just kind of squish it on there, and I'm kind of pushing down and in with my hands. And then at this point, you can either do some slap centering, or you can just start right in with regular centering. And so first, I kind of focus on making the top a little bit more dome shaped, and I'm kind of using my fingers to drag that clay up and down and to just try to make a nice uniform cone. And at this point it'll be kind of pushing you around, but don't worry about if it's doing that. You're just kind of trying to cone up and down. And it's really important to keep in mind that you want to have your legs squeezing around the splash pan to help stabilize you, feet going into the floor, elbows kind of tucked into your body or on your thighs or on your splash pan. You just want to have everything really braced and strong. And you really have to use your muscles when you use this much clay. So here you can see me struggling with it just a little bit, but that's kind of how it goes. And then at this point, I'm kind of leaning forward and using my torso to help my right hand push that clay down, while my left hand is on the side, helping keep things in line and centered. And you just want to go nice and slow, just kind of let the clay do its thing, but at the same time, be the boss. So I'm going to go up and down a little bit more. When you're going up, you always want to start with a dome. You don't want to have a super flat surface, because otherwise you can kind of start to turn into a little volcano in the middle. So that's why I'm kind of bringing my hand down from the top, using that part of my palm. And this clay is a little hard, so I kind of had to fight with it just a bit, but it's a good example of how things go sometimes. And so usually I'll just cone up and down maybe like twice or 3 times with a big piece of clay like this. I do find that it helps me get the clay centered, and also just helps mix the clay that much more. Of course, it's always important to wedge, but it also can be helpful to help homogenize the clay and warm it up by doing what's called wheel wedging, which is coning up and down. Alright, so here I'm centering while also kind of making it into a pancake. So I really used my torso to push that clay down, and I'm now just basically going to start pushing that clay down and out. And so I'm kind of blocking it now, but as you could see a little bit ago, I was really just using my whole fist and a little bit of my wrist and forearm to press down into the clay, and then you kind of move your fist from the center of your pancake out or towards yourself. So it's kind of like a horizontal pull almost, but that's kind of how I like to redistribute that clay. Well, I'm still keeping the left hand on the side to make sure it doesn't get off center. And you can also use a sponge to do this part, because I find that I have a little bit more control when I'm using 2 hands on a sponge, just pulling towards myself when you're redistributing that clay. So start off using your fist, and then once it gets a little flatter, you can kind of graduate to a sponge. So basically I'm just using the sponge to cushion my fingers. I find that sponges are really good for kind of distributing that force, so then you don't get a ton of throwing rings or kind of an uneven surface. You still get that a little bit, but a sponge is also good for compressing your plate. Compression is really important when you're doing things that are very flat, because there's just a lot of potential for getting an S-crack. And then here I'm just checking how thick it is. I like to throw my plates pretty thick, but that one was like an inch thick, so we're gonna just go down a little bit farther. I'd probably aim for, at minimum, 1/2 inch thick. You want to go a little bit thicker than that, just because when you wire it off, sometimes you can cut through the bottom of things, which is always sad. So here I'm just kind of going along the radius of the piece, just starting in the middle, compressing, moving out. So I'm both compressing and bringing that clay out. And notice how I'm not pushing too much on the rim. I'm kind of just letting there be this kind of ring of clay that I'll then use on the rim of my piece. And you kind of need to compress that together now and then just to make sure it's not getting too crazy. Okay, so here I am checking the thickness of the bottom again. It's a little bit thinner, so we're all good. I also noticed that it was looking a little bit ragged on that corner there, so sometimes you kind of got to go back and compress areas that are looking a little unhappy. But yeah, so plates can be a little bit boring sometimes because it's just a lot of compression, but do more than you think you need. So you can see I'm just really doing like a first pass with a sponge. This also just helps keep it nice and flat on the bottom. You know, you don't want to have like a moat on the outside where liquid is going to pool when you're using it, or you don't want to have like a belly button in the middle. So you can really use your sponge to help redistribute the clay. And check on that outside edge every now and then and make sure it's centered. It looks a little wobbly in this video, but that's all right. So then next I'm going to go in with my Mud Tools red rubber rib just to get things even more compressed. I really like this one because it's nice and bendy. You can see how I really just kind of press it on there gently, kind of pretending that my palm there is the plate, just to kind of show you guys what that looks like. But so I'm holding it with 2 hands just to have really good control over it, being gentle but still kind of pressing in. Whenever you go in with a rib on the plate like this, you always want to kind of gently apply that pressure and then just move along the radius of the piece, just kind of back and forth. And then you always want to lift off nice and slow, so that way you don't leave any dents in your plate. And you can also do this with a metal rib or a wooden rib. It's really up to you what you feel comfortable with, and you can just kind of try different ones out. I'm going in with my wooden tool just to clean up underneath so that I can get ready for doing my pulls. It really helps just to be able to get your fingers under there to do that pull. Just, it works a little bit better when you do it that way. I'm just adding in some water. And then when you're doing these pulls, you want to be really gentle. It doesn't really take much to squeeze that clay up and out. So I'm just kind of going in, just doing a mini pull here. Don't forget to compress your rim. And then if you want your platter to have an even taller side, then you can always kind of, with your right hand that's going underneath, you can kind of dig into the clay a little bit more and just basically kind of like lift up that edge of the plate even farther. So at this point there's a fair amount of flexibility. You can keep it shallow or you can make it kind of a more deep serving dish. It's really up to you. But just make sure to be nice and gentle. And also if it gets like really flat, it might, if the rim gets really flat and far out from the base, it could collapse. So I try to keep mine a little bit more on the vertical, rounded side. You don't want to have a little sombrero happening. And just kind of shape it until you're happy with it. And then after I do the rim, I kind of will go back and work on compressing. I just kind of like to compress for a while and then do the rim and then compress some more. And just kind of go back and forth. Keeps things interesting. So I also like to compress with the wooden rib because I feel like you can do a little bit more force than the Mud Tools red rib, and also it's really nice for flattening things out. So here I'm just using like the short end of the wooden rib, but you can also switch to the long end if you're feeling ambitious. But also I feel like it can kind of get away from you when you do that. So again, just always working on the radius of the piece. You know, you don't have to go crazy moving your rib around because you can just let the wheel do the work for you. And careful when you're in the middle because you don't want to dig up the clay too much. So usually I'll do the short edge first and then I'll switch to the long edge when I'm feeling like things are going well. So here you can, I don't know if you can tell, but I took just a little bit out of the middle by accident. So I'll probably go in with just a little bit of clay once it's lather hard and I'm trimming, just to kind of smooth out that belly button in the middle and patch it. You don't have to necessarily do that right now. You can always wait until later to fix things like that, and it's totally fine. But the rest of the plate is looking pretty nice and smooth. So here you just kind of gotta putz for a little while. Alright, so here I'm also going in with my yellow Mud Tools rib, and I like to use the curved side of this to really work on that junction between the bottom of my plate and the rim, because I like to kind of have it be this nice, rounded, seamless kind of look. So I'm using the bigger side of the rib to do this, and I'll take a little bit of slip off, but it's not a big deal. Back to business. So when it comes to trimming and wiring it off, I'll wait until it is a bit more firm, and I'll put the plate and the bat back on the wheel, and I'll wire underneath, and while the wheel is spinning, of course, keeping that wire really nice and tight. And it looks like this guy turned out to be about 12 inches wide. Yep. So once I wire it off, I will put a bat on top of it, flip it, let it dry a little bit longer, and then I will take it off and let it dry real nice and slow, and then do my trimming. All right, that's all. Thanks for watching, you guys.